Chapter 15. There's no such thing as an accident. With cold weather coming in and no word on how the war was going, we settled in to complete the harvest and brace for a hard winter. By late September, the days were considerably shorter and the nights increasingly longer and more boring. If you read between the lines in my letters during that fall, I seem almost greedy in my desire for mail from home. September 24th, 1944. Dear Mom and Dad, this Sunday I write to you a few lines to let you know I'm all right and hope and pray the same of all of you at home. You received quite a bit of mail from home. I also received a letter from Aunt Sophia and one from Leroy. I suppose Carol and Alice have grown up to be young ladies. I sure would like to see them. I sure hope and pray that the war will end soon and all the boys can come home. Tell Leroy to write me a letter, will you? Can't think of anything more to write, so we'll close. With all my love, and may God bless you, Gerard. Nevertheless, the mail and the Red Cross parcels arrived more or less regular basis during the fall. Those weeks passed as somewhat routine. I began to request things I needed, either for my own personal use or to trade, especially those items I thought I might actually get. In order to save her from buying stuff that would end up in the hands of some dishonest pilferer, I tried to establish a sort of code. If I thanked my mother for something, that meant I was actually there when I opened the PKG. If I didn't mention the item, don't send it anymore. I must have used poor at this code business. Later, my mother told me she just read my letters at face value, sending everything and just doubling up on those items I requested. October 22nd, 1944. Dear Mother, Dad, and all, I will this Sunday drop you a few lines to let you know I'm in good health and hope and pray that you are all well at home. I received 2 PKGs from you last week and also got 3 letters from you yesterday. It sure does seem good to be getting mail from home regular. I got a PKG with 3 cartons of cigarettes, and they sure did come in handy, especially them socks in the other package. Will you send me some good work gloves and some more socks? I also have been getting a lot of mail from Elaine. Will you send me some of my pictures? Love, Gerard. As I mentioned earlier, I've always been a meticulous, careful man. That's why what happened to me 3 weeks later on November 10th, 1944 was hardly a careless human mistake, more like an unavoidable equestrian misstep. Anyway, on that fateful day, I was riding in from the fields aboard one of the farm workhorses. I had no other choice but to blame the big Belgian for what happened. For some reason, unknown to me, it reared and threw me, and I was thrown off. My initial feelings of embarrassment gave way quickly as a sharp pain coming from my right shoulder area ripped through me. I tried to use my arm to help me up, but it was just hung there. I became increasingly nauseated by the pain and found standing up a challenge. And I finally made it and clumsily climbed back on the horse. My companions and I knew I was badly hurt, but we thought it was best just to fake it and head for the barn. Despite the pain, it crossed my mind more than once that the inspector would think an injured POW not worth feeding and just shoot me. So, somehow, with my injury undetected, I managed to stumble to my straw bed in the barn floor and collapse. For the next 2 weeks, I lay there with increasing agony and delirium. The commandments told of the accident, which must have decided to let nature take its course because I was left to fend for myself. Without medical attention or pain relievers, I suffered in a way that defies imagination. I couldn't sleep, occasionally dozing off mercilessly for a couple hours, only to be awakened by excruciating pain when I turned over and tried to move my arm. I couldn't eat and would have certainly starved if my buddies hadn't brought me thin broth to provide a few calories to keep my body hydrated. I certainly couldn't leave my bed to work. My arm became discolored, slowly turning into a sickly shade of green, all the way down from my wrist to my shoulder. I thought many times during those horrible days and nights that I just couldn't stand the pain any minute. But if you don't die, you do. Just stand the pain, that is. That's why they didn't excuse me is a mystery. Some people speculate the one-armed commander felt a kind of kinship and intervened to spare me. Others think the old guard must have liked me and admired how I had handled myself and horses. Whatever the reason, when it was obvious the shoulder was not going to heal on its own, I was taken to a nearby village to an elderly local physician. The man was simply a country doctor and must have had his reasons. Whatever his motivation or lack thereof, he refused to treat me. I couldn't understand his words as he spoke in German, but his body language and tone of voice clearly said, "I can't do anything for you. Go back home to the farm and die." But then he seemed to have another idea, born perhaps out of professional pride or human guilt, that he should at least suggest something. This time, I understood what he was proposing. Take him to Hammerstein, Stalag IIB, the POW camp. For a moment, my fear superseded the pain. I would surely not survive in the camp. How was I to know that by refusing to do anything for me, the man actually saved my life?